Hello YouTube. Today's video is a bit of a different style from normal. We catch up with Andy and Mia from 59 North Sailing to talk about our craziest stories from sea.
The storm kept growing and growing and growing. Just the noise and the terror of like the energy in the air. The wind just like becomes an animal and it has this noise to it. There's huge waves breaking.
Why is there so much water in the bilge? What the hell? We were literally sinking.
So the moral of the story is, when you're doing a big refit, always do a big sea trial and go out in the gnarliest weather you can.
And I'm looking up at the mast with my camera and I'm kind of just like rapid firing photos. And I have these photos of lightning just streaking across the sky. Like the photos, the mast, and then the lightning's just like stretched out across the sky around the mast. And you're like, how are we not getting hit? All right, so there's a little teaser of the upcoming stories, but first off, we want to share about an event we are collaborating on at the Annapolis Boat Show this October 2024. So a few details about that before sharing our craziest, most proud, and most beautiful stories from sea. Well, Andy, do you want to share a little bit about the event? We're super excited to collaborate with you guys. We're switching things up a little bit at the boat show. Instead of just going as YouTubers and going to the YouTube booth, we're getting our own booth. We're coming in as like an official sailing school, and we're all going to be in the same area as you guys in the YouTube channel booth, and we're going to collaborate with you guys on an event. So you want to share the deets on that?
So it's Friday, October 11th. We're hosting a half-day workshop with you guys called Offshore Cruising Distilled, the subtitle, The Shit That Matters Most. And it's basically just everything we've learned about ocean sailing, everything you guys have learned about long-distance cruising, condensed into 4 hours. So that's 9 to 1 at Ramshead on Stage, a really cool indoor concert venue that holds like 300 people. And we're trying to get people in and out, but give them just the essentials of what we've learned. So we're going to talk about the way I model seamanship through learning how to anticipate and then how to adapt. As you said, Brady, you love talking about weather. So do I. I think a big part of anticipating is anticipating the weather. We'll talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about boat prep and specifically mental prep to how to get yourself mentally prepared for this sort of thing and the ups and downs of ocean sailing. And then I think you guys are going to talk more about fundamentals of live-aboard cruising. So do you want to explain that, Blue?
It's going to cover everything from mindset, which is huge, as you mentioned, mindset, having realistic expectations, and then also talking about like our favorite gear that we have on board, and also the skills that we think people should spend the most time focusing on and perfecting before they actually get out there and go cruising.
Yeah, so last year we had a really good party on the Friday afternoon, and it's starting at 5 already, but if people are at the show, they can come afterwards. And it's basically come and grab a beer, hang out, share some stories, and if we're lucky, Matt's boat, Marie Tharp, is going to be there as well, that you can get a tour of.
The infamous Matt Rutherford.
Yeah.
So I'll put some links below in the description for the YouTube video that will lead people to where they can buy tickets and also more events like the nitty-gritty times, dates, all that kind of stuff for both the event and the party.
We also understand that not everybody travels to the boat show or can travel to the boat show, so we're going to live stream this year, which is going to be new for us, but it's going to give an opportunity for, we want to try to meet the widest audience. It's part of the reason we're working with you guys. We have similar mindsets, we have similar philosophies on this. Let's try to reach the most amount of people. We don't have all the details set up just yet, but we're going to live stream it, and if you want to buy a ticket to the event, but you can't make it in person, you'll be able to do that.
We are stoked to share that this video is sponsored by AG1. We've been drinking AG1 aboard Lintika for over a year now, and it matches perfectly with living aboard a sailboat. It's a super easy way to do something good for yourself each morning. It takes up very little space, which is really important on a sailboat, and it's delicious. So drinking AG1 has become a ritual aboard Lintika every single morning. It's super simple. You have this nice little bottle. You put a scoop of AG1 inside, you add water, shake it up, drink it down, and boom! You get 75 vitamins and minerals, you get antioxidants to support the immune system, and you get probiotics to support gut health. I've definitely noticed a difference in my energy throughout the day, and my personal favorite thing is that it's packed with adaptogens and superfoods that counteract free radicals. So if you'd like to do something truly good for yourself, go to drinkag1.com/Cruisers Academy. If you go there, you're going to get 5 free travel packs and a free year supply of D3K3 with your first order.
Well, yeah, in the theme of the event, you know, the shit that really matters, we thought it would be fun to record. I'm sure that when people find out you guys are sailors, one of the main questions you get is like, oh, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen at sea? Like, you know, I have people ask me like, oh, have you ever gotten stuck in a hurricane or like gotten boarded by pirates? And it's like, well, you know, most of that stuff can be avoided. It's not really like that, but stuff can go wrong. And so, you know, it does. And so I thought it'd be cool if we each kind of shared our, you know, our craziest or scariest moment from sea when something stuck out and there was a lesson of seamanship that came from it.
I love this. I love this idea.
I mean, there's a lot of stories of things that have happened over the years, from dragging anchor to things, water makers exploding and shooting hot water straight into the inverter, which then sparks, and then you don't have power on the boat. A lot of things that you can cover, but I do want to cover one just about weather, because I really love talking about weather and how, I don't know, unpredictable it can be and how you always have to be prepared. So this one, we were specifically crossing from Chagos, which is the middle of the Indian Ocean, and we were trying to make our way to Madagascar. And it's about a 1,400 mile sail. The Indian Ocean is notorious for, you look at the forecast and the grid files and it'll show like 20 to 25, and then it actually blows like 35 to 45, like consistently. And we didn't know that till we were sailing across it. You're like, these are always wrong. So we were during the crossing, a couple days in, you know, that's probably about a 12-day crossing with us doing 5.5 knots or so. And halfway in, we started to see this low pressure system out of season start to form pretty south in the southern Indian Ocean, and it was tracking north, it was gonna cut us off. So we were going this way, and it was coming kind of up from the bottom. And we saw it 5 days out, which is great, but it also sucks. Because then you're like, okay, we have so many choices to make. Do we veer away from this thing and go north? Do we heave to, try and make it pass us? Do we try and speed up and go in front of it? And you're kind of second guessing. Every time you check the forecast, you're figuring out what to do. So our decision was to stay on course, keep going, make the boat as safe and comfortable as possible, and see how it developed. And if we had to go through it, we had the tools, we had the storm drogue, we had all the stuff available to make sure that we did it safely. The problem that we figured out was that there is a massive current going up the east side of Madagascar, going from south to north, like super fast 4.5, 5 knot current that goes that way. And you don't want to be going against that current. So what we didn't do correctly is early on aim south enough, so that way when the storm hit us, we could turn away from the wind, bear away, and then go with the current and go along with it. So we tried to make our southing as much as possible once we figured this out, but eventually the storm kept growing and growing and growing, and it finally hit us, of course, in the middle of the night. So we saw, starting out, it was like 35 and then 45, and then back then we only had the analog wind anemometer, so it tops out at 50, and it was just pinned at 50 knots. Pinned at 50 knots, the sun is going down, and just the noise and the terror of like the energy in the air. The wind just like becomes an animal and it has this noise to it. There's huge waves breaking. Occasionally you'd see a wave if we put a spotlight out, and they were at least 10 meters, so above the spreader, high up, and we were just trying our best to keep them hitting us at the beam or aft of the beam, so that way we didn't go too far and slam down. And if we went too far away and ran with it, then we had the possibility of pitch pulling. So then you're in the storm situation, you're like, oh shit, should we turn and run with it now? And we thought about that, but then you have that problem. You can throw a drogue out and you can kind of slow yourself down, but then we would have either ended up in the Seychelles or, worst case scenario, Somalia. And Somalia at that time was really bad with pirates, so we decided to just go with it, put a little scrap of head sail out, just a tiny little bit of it, try and keep the wind and the waves right on the beam, and try and make it through it. So Brian and I did 30-minute shifts hand steering, because obviously the autopilot can't keep up with it. So 30 minutes on and off hand steering for about 8 to 12 hours. It kind of blurred together until the sun came up the next day. And luckily, when the sun came up the next day, we had made just enough southing so we didn't have to point into the current. We kind of hit the current like this, and it pushed us up above the cape, the northern cape of Madagascar, and we rounded the cape. Nothing specifically broke except, I think, people. Like our emotions and how tired we were, and anxiety and panic. And I mean, it was the first time ever we had to close the whole companionway up, the whole hatch up. Brian and I were clipped in the cockpit. Every time these massive 30-foot waves came, they would fill the cockpit with water. Damn. So you're like in there, and then it would dissipate. So people were seasick down below, and the biggest lesson from that is knowing the currents. Currents are very, very important when it comes to sailing, right? Just as important as wind and sea conditions. So paying attention to currents ahead of time, and also knowing when to trust your boat. Like when to just sit back and be like, this boat can handle it. I'm gonna break first, so I need to take care of myself and rest as much as I can, or eat, instead of freaking out and worrying about the boat breaking all the time. If the boat's gonna break, it's gonna break, right? So you kind of have to focus on trusting it, and then focus on yourself, which we didn't do very well, which led to exhaustion and anxiety and all kinds of stuff like that. So those were the two biggest lessons from that specific storm.
That's gnarly, man. Yeah, still, all the miles I've sailed, I've never sailed in anything that serious for that extended amount of time. So that's, yeah, no thank you. People say that when they sail with us, we want to see heavy weather. It's like, well,
No,
are you
you
sure?
don't. No.
Can't get
don't.
off.
Same. People always say that to us. Like, let's get out there. It's like, well, the thing is, you don't really do that to your boat, especially when it's your home. You know,
No,
you're always
exactly.
trying to be conservative, but yeah.
I mean, eventually it will happen to you, and like what we teach is slow is smooth, and smooth is fast, right? So like you say, be prepared, think about things. Knee-jerk reactions are the ones that are going to make mistakes. So slow down, assess the situation, even if it's a week out, and make the right decisions, which will help you out in the long run. But yeah, being in that definitely taught me a lot. And during it, you're like, this fucking sucks. I don't want to be out here. I'm gonna get on a plane when I get to Madagascar. We're done. And then you round the northern cape of Madagascar, and you're in the protection of the wind, and the sun's setting, and it's flat. And you're like, that was the coolest thing I've ever been through.
100%. Totally. Every time.
So it's one of those weird adrenaline rush things. All right, Blue, you want to tell us a story?
I want to hear Andy's first.
All right.
All right. Well, so I don't have a ton of dramatic stories. I mean, probably the most dramatic was actually a medical emergency when I got appendicitis offshore. Ooh. But I'm not going to tell that story because I've told it a million times before.
That's
We'll
my
save that
my
one for
worst.
another
That's
time.
my worst nightmare, by the way. It's terrifying.
Yeah. So I'm still here. It worked out. But what the story I want to tell is actually probably the most challenging trip I've skippered, but also with like the best outcome. Like it was a chance for me to like put all this stuff together, and we actually accomplished what my goal was. And prior to this, it was the most challenging trip was going up to Svalbard when you guys met us up in Longyearbyen. Like that passage was really challenging, and I was proud of that and everything. And that gave me the confidence to like go further. So last summer, the first year on Falcon, I skippered a trip with James the Sailor Man of YouTube fame. He was along for the ride. We went from Newfoundland to Greenland and then on to Iceland. So you have this two big ocean passages. So 800 miles from Newfoundland to the southern tip of Greenland. Then we did some cruising through the Prince Christian Sound, which is like a 70-mile fjord through the mountains. It was unbelievable. And then another 800-mile passage across the Denmark Strait, which is like a notorious stretch of ocean to get to Iceland. So the challenge was like, it was all the things you always have with a cruising trip, but then it was ice, it was cold, and it was fog, and it was now, like, I'm not... In combination, but also I'm not used to, I think what you guys do, coastal cruising, is in a lot of ways more challenging than offshore sailing.
More stuff to hit.
As soon as I'm out of the harbor, as soon as I'm out of the harbor in deep water, I can just chill. So anyway, we leave St. John's and point the bow north. We had a beautiful light air sail for the first half, and we were there was like on the ice charts, there was like a band of like icebergs and icy stuff about 60 miles out from where we were going to make landfall on the coast. And unlike Svalbard, it gets dark in Greenland because the southern tip of Greenland is actually at the same latitude as where we are now in Sweden, 59 degrees north. But we were there in August, it gets dark at night for a few hours. So I was trying to time that arrival, not the landfall arrival, but like the arrival to the outer band of ice, trying to time that in daylight, and ideally no fog. I couldn't help the fog, but we could help the daylight. And also wanted to set us up in a position where we could, when you're navigating through ice, especially in open water like that, if there's any wind, you want to put yourself in a position where you can turn the boat right or left, which means like if you're close hauled as you enter that, you can only tack. You want to be able to maneuver around stuff, particularly if it's low visibility. So we wanted to position ourselves upwind so that we would be approaching the ice on like a beam reach or a broad reach to give us the most maneuverability as we worked our way, because it was still 60 miles to get through all this, and we didn't really know how thick it was going to be. It wasn't sea ice or anything. It was icebergs and bergy bits. So we get bergy bits. We get like 3/4 of the way across the Labrador Sea, and the wind started coming in on the nose. And this was another, Brady, I also love talking about weather. So this was like it was like AP weather routing, right? It was like, okay, now you got wind and stuff, but you also have ice. So the wind started coming on the nose, and we were going to have to start tacking. And if we would have continued sailing, we would have arrived at this outer band of the ice in darkness. And also, the wind was going to shift from north back to west, so it was going to go from right on the nose to more on the beam. So instead of continuing, we hove to, and we were still probably 24 to 48 hours out from our expected arrival. So we hove to for a while, waited for the wind to shift around, and expecting the wind to shift, as it shifted around, we could get underway again and didn't get set off to the east like we would have if we would have continued close hauled. And as the wind continued to shift, we continued to aim left or west of our destination to get ground to windward. So like even if we could have pointed right at Nanortalik, this little village we were going, we could have done that on a beam reach. I brought the boat up and sailed on a close reach, almost close hauled, to gain ground to weather, so that when we got to the ice edge, it was going to be in the right wind angle. So of course we get there. The daylight was great. It was daylight, awesome, check. We were upwind, check. Except it was fucking thickest fog I've ever sailed in. Like it was so heavy fog. And the wind was up. It was blowing like 25 knots. And Falcon on a broad reach is just a machine, man. We were doing like 9-10 knots just flying. And we had somebody on radar watch, and we had people watching in the cockpit. And I said, all right, as soon as we get the first ice target on radar, we're slowing this ship down. So we saw a target on radar. We said, all right, take the jib down, put the staysail up, put 3 reefs in the main. We had full sail prior to that. Even with 3 reefs in the main and the staysail, we were still going like 6 knots. But that allowed us to slow down, and we had windward maneuverability. And basically, for the last 60 miles, you could see these big targets on the radar, but you never saw the iceberg because it was so foggy. And a couple times we did see some bergy bits, and that's when we kind of like almost relaxed a little bit because we knew what to look for. It was very clear that even in this heavy fog, if you know what to look for, you're going to see the ice. We had a person stationed at the bow as a lookout. So as we sail closer and closer, it turned out it was a beautiful day in Greenland because we got to there was like a group of sort of outer islands, like barrier islands, and we got in past them, and all of a sudden, like through the mist, we started seeing icebergs. And it was like, oh shit, look at that. That is so cool. And then we started seeing like if you looked up, these mountain peaks in the distance. And then all of a sudden, like passing through a curtain, we sailed out of this fog bank, and it was like a bluebird sunny day, and we're surrounded by like sawtooth mountains and icebergs everywhere and the little town. And it was like, still the most magical landfall I've ever had because of like the combination of the degree of difficulty, the different challenges that I'd never had to do before, and the just amazing scenery when we got there. It was like such a feeling of gratification and like satisfaction. And any landfall is satisfying, but especially the challenging ones. I mean, you just said it yourself there, like in Madagascar. It's like, man, that was really cool. And I think the takeaway for me for that is like all this stuff I've read about, all the things I've learned, all the things I've studied, like it paid off in that moment. And that was like the payoff, because it wasn't that stressful. And that's the point. That's what we're trying to emphasize. It was difficult, but like we knew what to do, and it was cool. So that the trip to Iceland, the postscript to that was we got the shit beat out of us on the way to Iceland because it was like upwind the whole way. But we made it. It was fine. Another good landfall. But that's still, I think I'm most proud of that first passage and making landfall in Greenland, that's probably the trip I'm most proud of as a skipper.
Sounds like a scene out of a movie.
Totally.
Like I could just picture you coming out of the fog and you're in this like fairy tale paradise with green cliffs and icebergs, and wow, that's cool.
Truly.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very cool.
Oh yeah, the ice is a whole nother beast. You know, I know when we went to Svalbard with you guys and you're like, oh, we hired this ice forecaster to be keeping an eye on where things are, and I'm like, whoa, that's a whole nother aspect that someone can specialize in, you know?
Totally, another variable.
Yeah.
All right, Blue, what's your story?
All right, well, let's see. Yeah, I agree, Andy. I mean, I think that if you're well prepared, you can avoid most stuff. So, you know, in like the 20,000 nautical miles I had on Delos up until the point of this story, I didn't really see any, you know, super crazy weather or anything like that. But when we were doing our lap of the North Atlantic on Delos, we had just kicked off the first leg. We left Florida. We were on our way to Bermuda. And I think it was like about 1,000 nautical miles of the passage, and we were a little more than halfway coming into the Bermuda Triangle, you know, so we're all kind of like, oh, what's gonna happen here? And, you know, coming into night watch, and I think around like 10 p.m. I actually just went back and watched this episode because we filmed it, and I just to jog my memory, but yeah, it was like 10 p.m. and this like cold front comes through, and we just get surrounded by the most lightning I've ever seen in my entire life, times like 1,000.
I hate lightning.
Lightning on a boat in the ocean is the worst freaking thing ever.
The worst.
Oh
Yeah, and we had just been in Florida for like a month and a half or something prepping for the crossing, so, you know, had seen a lot of lightning, but nothing close to the amount of lightning that we were seeing here. So we were pretty much surrounded by lightning for like 4 or 5 hours, and that's stressful. You know, you're the only metal object around for hundreds of miles, like a 60-foot aluminum pole just sticking straight up in the sky. And there's nothing you can do, you know, when you're out there in the middle of it, like that's it. And I think about it all the time because we do have like a fair amount of afternoon lightning storms here on Lake Tahoe. And it's like, if there's lightning coming, you get off the water. That's just like standard. And I always think back to this storm that we were in where you're just, I mean, you're 600 miles from shore. Like there's nothing you can do. You're just in it, you know? So I don't know if you guys have ever done this.
You hear like you hear these stories too of like boats getting struck by lightning and it travels down the forestay and like blows out the freaking like headstay fitting. It's like what?
Yeah.
And like then and you know you're in it like, well, I hope that doesn't happen because there's nothing you do.
Totally. Yeah. What can you do, right? So I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but we've always heard the legend, which maybe someone can confirm one day if this actually works, of the oven being the Faraday cage.
I've confirmed it. Let's just say it works.
Science, Dr. Brady, Dr. Brady, electrical scientist.
Yeah, it works.
That might be a Brady fact, but we'll run with it. So, you know, we take like our Iridium Go and like our hard drives of footage that we've been busting our butt for the last couple months to film. We put them in the oven and cross our fingers. And so yeah, we're just in the thick of this. The wind wasn't too crazy. I think it was just sort of all over the place. I think at one point we had like 40 knots, but we just had the sails in and we were motoring. But yeah, there's footage of it. I mean, we just let a GoPro run in the cockpit and just like flash for like 5 hours all the way around the boat. And at one point I was sitting in the cockpit, in the companionway, and I'm looking up at the mast with my camera and I'm kind of just like rapid firing photos. And I have these photos of lightning just streaking across the sky. Like the photos of the mast, and then the lightning's just like stretched out across the sky around the mast. And you're like, how are we not getting hit right now?
I don't know how. There's definitely some weather phenomenon that like lightning travels through clouds versus like hitting the ground. And we were lucky enough to be in that one.
That one, yeah. So anyways, we make it through, you know, it kind of fades away. There's another storm going alongside of us that we were just watching it and it never actually hit us. But the kind of seamanship story that comes into this is we were actually kind of prepared for this one because a few months before this, we had been sailing Delos from Puerto Rico to the Bahamas, and we got in a lightning storm. I mean, nothing compared to this one, but it was the biggest one that I had been in at that point. And so I remember like asking Brian, well, what happens if we get struck by lightning? And he's like, well, you know, the through holes could blow out, and we'd likely lose all
Sink
of our...
instantly.
Yeah, likely lose all of our electronics. I'm like, well, what happens if we lose all of our electronics? And there wasn't like an answer to that. So I was like, ooh, deep pit of fear got planted in me on that one. And we didn't have a sextant on board or anything. So when we got to Puerto Rico, we got a sextant. And right when we sailed away from Puerto Rico, we learned how to use it. Because I was like, I'm never going to be in that situation again. You know, just being out on the open ocean and no idea where you are. You know, and that's something that I think it kind of brings in an interesting topic of like relying on modern technology and electronics and how much you want to do that. And how some of these skills, like of using the sextant, you know, have been lost on modern sailors because technology is so accessible. It's quite easy, actually, to just navigate around and look at weather and do all this stuff. But until you're in that moment where you're like, wow, we could lose everything. What skills do we have? It doesn't really hit you until you're out there and you're like, whoa.
I actually think that, well, two things. First of all, Matt Rutherford has never learned Celestial. He's just like, well, I'll just keep sailing. Eventually, I'll run into something.
Yo, that's Matt. He's just very special
on you.
human.
But that's mad for you.
Yeah.
Right. But I actually think that the point of the technology stuff, especially now with Starlink, is more important even with communications because, like, if you same situation, like we always carry an Iridium handset because you can stick that in the oven.
Yeah.
You know, you're always going to be always able to make a phone call even if you're in the life raft.
Yeah.
Whereas like. So installing Starlink on your boat makes awesome comms normally, but it's not a replacement for this like emergency stuff. And I think that gets lost on people as well in that same vein.
Oh, 100%.
But regarding lightning, I read this somewhere, and this is like what I buy this
Dr.
theory.
Andy?
This is a Dr. Andy fact right here. That basically a sailboat is actually safer at sea in a lightning storm than at the dock because the mast is moving. And I guess for a lightning strike to connect with the mast, the mast has to collect negative ions. And if the mast is constantly moving, it's shaking them off. And you hear a lot of stories of like you guys just said, being surrounded by lightning and not getting struck. And then if you look at the insurance data, there's way more insurance claims of boats being struck at anchor or at the dock than there are at sea. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm going to say it is, and that's what helps me get through a lightning storm.
I'm
On the
gonna
other
believe
hand,
it.
there's way more boats at the dock and anchor than at sea.
Sure.
That's fine. It's still
Mia,
it's
Sorry.
don't ruin this for
I'm
us.
sorry.
Don't ruin this for us.
Don't, seriously. Cut that part out.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've had it up here 2 times now. I mean, like I said, you know, lightning is not uncommon on the lake, but we've been out in our smaller sailboats on the lake with lightning coming through. And even if it's not super close, where everything, you start getting shocked by everything on the boat. So like any of the standing rigging,
'cause of all the static.
yeah,
Oh,
if
God.
like
It's
the outboard
terrifying.
mount, so you have, I mean, we've been on board and I've had to watch students pull down the hank on jib sail and they're like, ow, 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 ow.
Oh my
and we're like
God,
starting the
F that.
outboard and getting back. So
It's scary.
Yeah, that's trippy.
But then
too.
we can just go to the dock and
Yeah.
put the boat away, right? So
Yeah. All right, so I'm just going to set the tone here a second because when we teach seamanship and talk about it, like good seamanship is boring. And you don't want to have these stories. It's all about preparation. I mean, we talk about anticipating and adapting, and that's like the 2 foundational pillars when I talk about seamanship. But there's one story where we actually deliberately went out to try to see how many things could go wrong, and that was when we did the sea trial on Falcon after we built the boat. So we did this the first time we'd ever sailed the boat after it had been in the shed for a year. We had 9 staff members on the boat, and we're just like in the English Channel in January in horrendous weather, deliberately to put ourselves in a position to see if we could break the boat, so that we can then fix everything before the actual customers come on board. So Mia, you're gonna tell this story, I think.
So yeah, it was in January 22, and we had just put the boat through a 1-year-long refit. Like everything on the boat had been new, replaced. So every system was new on the boat, and like Andy said, to be able to test the boat, we wanted to get out in good weather, and we were hoping it was going to be blowing good.
As in bad weather.
Yeah, bad weather, like to actually test the boat. And when we got out there, we looked at the forecast, and it was going to be really good, like really bad. And when we were out there, we went through like a hailstorm. It was blowing like 50 knots one night, gusting. And on top of it, I had also caught, I think, a stomach bug beforehand. I tend to get seasick sometimes, but I really got to try out the buckets, which was really bad. But in hindsight, I think it was actually a little stomach bug that I had. But yeah, the whole point was to get things tested to the limit because we didn't want things to be breaking on the first passage. And things did break. Like we were hoisting the main, and we ripped the headboard out of the mainsail was one of them, which
talk about stupid. Like this was actually a stupid thing where the sail got caught in one of the fittings for the running backstays, and nobody noticed it. It was dark, and in the process of grinding it up with the grinding pedestal we have, we literally pulled the aluminum headboard right out of the top of the sail, which should never have happened. Like it should have broken something else first.
But another stupid thing that happened that was that when they installed some of the side slats to like keep insulation, not insulation, but to keep the condensation of the hull, it was a simple job. So they probably put the lowest on the rang apprentice doing that. But in the process, that person did not check how thick the hull was. And before we launched the boat, we've discovered a lot of these pinholes through the hull under the waterline.
Oh shit!
And during the sea trial, when we were heeled over, in one of the lockers, one of the staff came by, and it was like a pea stream coming out through one of the lockers, and
why is there so much water in the bilge? What the hell? We were literally sinking.
So the moral of the story is, when you're doing a big refit, always do a big sea trial and go out in the gnarliest weather you can, so you can actually test the boat to the limit.
You forgot the funniest story, though. The funniest story was.
Yes.
Do you want to tell it? Or
Yes.
You want me to tell it? This is the best, and this actually changed the design of the part of the interior.
Yeah. So when you have when you're having sea bunks, you always want to have some good lee cloth so people don't fall out of the bunk. Well, we had lee cloth, and we went out sailing, and the boat was heeled over hard, and Adam, who's now our bosun, he was sleeping on the port side aft.
On the high side.
And
he's like in a sleeping bag, like a mummy, like, because it was cold. It's January. So he's got his hat, he's got his sleeping bag over his head, his arms are like crossed, and he's like bundled in there.
And then I was in the bunk just aft of him, and all of a sudden I hear like, and he had actually rolled out above the lee cloth and fell right onto the bunk. But since his arms
he fell on the floor.
Since his arm was wrapped up in his sleeping bag, he had no way to catch him, so he basically just rolled out of bed and just fell on the floor from the high side. But he just stayed there.
Man,
he grabbed a pillow.
And he's like, oh, I guess I'm okay. Can someone give me my pillow? And he just stayed there.
And then we switched lee cloth to lee boards.
So that was a changing out some kit. My favorite story to end that though is we sailed through this horrendous weather, like mission accomplished, and then we got back to the Isle of Wight and we anchored. And we had one night at anchor with the whole gang, and we cooked food. And the next morning, we went for like another one of my cold water swims. But everybody jumped in the water at the same time, and we had never tested the swim ladder before. So the swim ladder's down, but there was nothing stopping it from swinging under the transom. So like the first person tried to get out, and they couldn't use the ladder, and everyone was like, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" So we had to modify the swim ladder as well, which was learned the hard way.
Oh my gosh. One time when we were in the Atlantic, we were sailing. It wasn't even that rough of conditions, but like a rogue wave came totally out of pattern and hit like on the beam of Delos. And I was sleeping in the aft cabin, and I was on the high side, and it launched me all the way across the cabin, and I like hit the desk on the other side, and the mattress came and fell on top of me.
Holy shit.
And it shattered the mirror in the forward head.
Yeah.
It was so big. I like got up and I was like, what the hell just happened? But it was just one wave. Yeah.
So I guess the point of that sea trial story is we did all that deliberately, and we still had stuff happen. I mean, you get a new boat or a refit boat, you're always gonna have stuff happening, but like we addressed all the big things. We had, I think, a month after the sea trial to fix everything. So we actually did a proper sea trial, though shortened, and addressed all this stuff. And we've had really good success with Falcon since. So that's like the lesson here is take the time to shake things down before you actually go cruising for real.
Definitely, especially if you're taking paid customers.
Yeah, added stakes.
Well, now that we've probably scared the shit out of everyone, I thought it'd be cool to round it out and just say like one little moment of when you think back on like all your years and all your miles of sailing. Like, you know, everyone always says cruising is extreme highs and extreme lows. So is there a moment that stands out to you guys? I mean, Andy, your story kind of had one in it, but where you're like, wow, this is like one of the coolest moments of my life.
You want to go first?
Should I
Mia?
start?
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, one thing that I realized was that I love stargazing. And in Sweden, in the wintertime, we have amazing stars. You know, we live in the countryside. You can see like really good stars, but it's always so cold. So like you're spending maybe like a few minutes out there until you're like frozen. And then I realized, I think it was just last year it dawned to me that like when you're offshore, like crossing the Atlantic and it's no light pollution out there, and you can actually lay in the cockpit looking at the stars in shorts and t-shirts, and you can be out there for hours and just enjoy it. So to me, like seeing the stars offshore in shorts and t-shirt really is a special moment. And we had a passage this winter. It was from Portugal down to the Canaries, and every single night it was just absolutely amazing stars, and like you could just see the Milky Way. Everything was so clear. So yeah, stars to me is always really, really cool.
It's a good high.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Brady?
Meeting Blue. That's what she's.
I told him to say that before.
No. She's like, that's what you're gonna say, right? For me, it's definitely sailing to the most remote places are the highs. Like specifically, what stands out in my mind is pulling into an island called Tana in the Solomon Islands. No, in Vanuatu in the Pacific. And we were coming in at night, beautiful trade wind conditions, so it's warm, 10 knots of breeze, just cruising along real slow, no swell, and then in the distance you see a volcano slowly pulsing and going off.
Oh, wow.
And then like you get to this place and you drop anchor at sunrise, and there's like a true traditional old school Vanuatuan village that comes out and greets you and paddle dugout canoes. And like you can barely speak to each other, but then it's just on, right? Like you're hanging out, you're swimming, you go in and they want to show you everything. They cook for you, take you, climb the volcano, and you see the volcano going off in front of your face. It's those moments of like the exploration side of cruising that have always given me the most chills or appreciation for the hard parts, for what happened, because you feel like nothing else matters and you're just in the moment and you've almost time traveled in a way.
Totally, I love that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd say one that really stands out for me is a couple winters ago, you know, we sailed Lintika from San Francisco down to Mexico, and you know, it was ironic because it was like the biggest winter in California since 1950 that we decided to do this. So, you know, we shove off, and for, you know, a month going down the coast of California, it was either like 60 knots of, you know, pissing rain or 0 knots of wind. And that was like our whole passage down the California coast. So it was pretty much like motor, get into port, tie up at the marina, and then it's just like dumping buckets of rain for the week. And then you go back out and motor some more. So that was like a really,
oh man,
yeah, mentally it was so hard for us, for the business, our relationship. You know, we had guests on board. It was like, it really pushed us to the edge. Meanwhile, back in Tahoe, again, best winter since 1950. So all of our friends are just getting like face deep pow every single day. And we're just watching them like, oh my God, like we're missing this, you know? So definitely questioning like, what are we doing with our lives? You know, is this what we want to be doing? So anyways, finally, once we get into Baja, we kind of got out of the weather pattern. And, you know, we stopped along the way, but we pretty much had like 1,000 miles of downwind sailing, flying the spinnaker, you know, all day and all night. And it's just crazy how, like, I remember waking up one morning for sunrise, and it was like the most beautiful sunrise. And I'm just out on deck with the spinnaker and my coffee, and like the whole last couple months of bullshit, it's just like, it just feels like washed away. Like every wave that like comes over pushing the boat, it just like takes away like all that stress, and you're like, yeah, this is why we do it, you know?
Well, that you wouldn't have that without all the bullshit. That
Totally.
makes the good feeling even better. So that's kind of the beauty of it,
Yeah.
is the ups and downs.
Yeah.
That's for me too. Experiencing all that. I
For
love
sure.
that.
And that's why I love sailing so much. I mean, sailing's fun and I enjoy it, but for me, it's been the coolest conduit for learning about life, because it will push you like so hard to these crazy extremes, and like it just builds so much character in you because you have to like endure, and then you get those crazy highs. So it's like, that's what sailing is to me, you know?
So my crazy high was actually recently. My last transatlantic I did on Falcon. You know, this is our second season with this new boat. I've gotten more and more comfortable, confident with it. And we had a absolutely perfect trade wind, Cape Verde to Barbados, 2,000 miles, just unbelievable weather the whole time. Like what you get in the
Nice.
brochure,
Yeah.
15 to 20 knots, sunshine, not a drop of rain. And we put the kite up. The spinnaker on Falcon is 3,000 square feet. It's huge.
Oh.
So we put the kite up towards the end of the trip, and you know, by then the crew's in their routines. I was confident in everybody, so we were leaving it up overnight. And I think the last 48 hours we had it up pretty much continuously. And we made, like, we spotted Barbados. The moon was out. We had the spinnaker up, and the wind was starting to build a little bit, but still the sea was calm and like from the same direction. Falcon would lift up on these waves. We were probably sailing 10, 11 knots, like in flat water, and then we'd lift up on these waves and catch these like long surfs. And we would every surf we'd hit 14,
Whoa,
15, 16 knots.
cool.
And then it would slow down to 11, and then again 14, 15, 16, and it was like light on the helm. The moon was out. It was just, you could see like the glow from the island over here off the port bow, and it was just one of those moments where you're like, all right, we're almost at the end of this passage, but yet we don't want this to end.
Totally.
This is like the best
Yeah.
night of the trip so far. We covered 88 miles in 8 hours.
Wow.
So that's like an 11 knot average. And then we did, in one span in the logbook, we covered 14 miles in 1 hour between one log to the next. So we averaged 14 knots for an hour.
Whoa.
And it was just like perfect, like drama-free, perfect sailing. And that's like, you know, that's why you do it.
That's why
It's
you do
so,
it, yeah.
So cool. That's why you do it.
Totally.
But I think that is, to wrap it up too, like the contrast of like the real, like you said, Blue, the really, really shitty days when things just suck and you just wish you would be laying on the couch eating chips. And then you have these
Eating
really, really
chips.
highs that just kind of blows your mind.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of it. I think every passage I do, I probably feel like I wonder why I do it, but then I also really understand why I do it.
I know exactly what you mean. You're like, why? And you're like, oh yeah, this is it. This is why.
Yeah, this is a choice. We don't have to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, it's like, why?
Yeah. That's what I think is so cool too, and like that's why I love sharing, you know, through the sailing school, like teaching people about all this stuff, because I think sailing can be really romanticized, especially like with YouTube and stuff. People have this idea, like, I don't know if you guys get messages like this, but I get a lot of messages from people that are like, I can't wait to sell everything and buy a boat and just, you know, get rid of all my problems. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah, right.
I'm really glad you came to us, because
Don't put that down payment yet.
Yeah, there's a good real discussion to be had here, and you're not going to get rid of all your problems. You're going to trade in your problems on land for a completely different, probably more frustrating set of problems, you know? But I think that, and that doesn't mean like you shouldn't go do it, obviously, that's not what we're promoting, but it's like, I think expectations are huge when it comes to spending time on boats. And if you can help people, you know, get more realistic expectations, then they can handle what's ahead of them. And if they think it's gonna be all sunshine and rainbows, like, they're not gonna have a very good time.
That's
Couldn't agree more.
that's kind of what the whole boat show seminar is all about.
Yeah.
Expectations,
Yeah.
setting yourself
That's right.
up for success, all the good stuff.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, thanks for chatting with us, you guys. This was fun. And looking forward to seeing you at the boat show, both having our booths, maybe setting off some cannons and...
Yeah.
100% we're firing cannons. It's
Cannon battle.
I told
It's gonna be
you.
nice to see.
I need a new one.
Do this in person too.
Oh, wait.
No more of this 9-hour time difference stuff. You need a new one because you broke it.
Yeah,
right?
tell the story about
you break
how
it?
you broke it.
I
Brady.
didn't really break it. We
The drill bit got stuck.
we had
in
a
it.
couple too many rums, and I ran out of fuses. But then I found a sparkler, and I was like, a sparkler will work great as a fuse. So the
clever
So the
idea.
sparkler fit perfect in the fuse hole. the first couple times, and we lit it, and the cannon was working perfectly. And then the rest of the sparklers that we had were too big. They had too much gunpowder on them, so they wouldn't fit in the fuse hole. So I was like, I'll just drill the fuse hole out a little bigger to put the sparkler in. And then the drill bit broke off way down in the cannon, and I just haven't had a press or anything to get it out. And I just need a second one, really. Is all that is about.
Moral of the story: buy more fuse.
Yeah.
Brady needs another cannon.
Yeah, I can get more fuse.
All right, we'll see what we can do.
Cool. We're excited to see you guys in person, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks
Yeah,
for doing
thank you
this.
guys.
If you're interested in joining us at the Annapolis Boat Show, head to the link on the screen or click the link in our description. We'll be updating that site with booth schedule and details as they are finalized. Be sure to join our mailing list as well. That's where we'll share with you how to watch our presentation with 59 North live on YouTube. If you're interested in joining us for an offshore cruising course, head to cruisersacademy.com where all the dates and details are listed.